Hey, I am so excited to share this show with you today on this very special day. This is Conversations with Visionaries celebrating independence and freedom. Join us for an upcoming interview series where we'll explore the complex and layered topics of independence and freedom. In this series, we'll engage with some of the world's most innovative leaders who have served their country with distinction. Each episode will feature prominent figures from various fields who will share remarkable insights and experiences on achieving liberation and the challenges faced in the journey towards a free society. From political leaders to military icons, our guests will offer unique perspectives on how they shaped their nation's histories. As we listen to their stories, we can expect to be inspired and motivated by their struggles and triumphs, as well as their visions for a better world built upon the foundations of independence and freedom. Through the lens of historical events and current affairs, this interview series aims to delve deeper into the meaning of what it truly means to be independent and free. Join us and celebrate the courage and determination of those who fought for it. Don't miss on this opportunity to gain a greater understanding of what it takes to make true liberation. Welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show, where you're about to go on a wellness-driven ride. Let me introduce our guests. John P. Weiss is a retired police chief with over 26 years of experience. He was awarded Man of the Year by the Scotts Valley Chamber of Commerce in 2016. Since retirement, he has become an author, artist, and educator with his essays and artwork featured in publications like The Guardian, NBC News, and Becoming Minimalist. He has a following of over 49,000 readers on medium.com and over 12,000 subscribers on his Saturday letters, inspiring others through his creative work. Mr. Phillip Koontz is a former Navy SEAL of over 6 years, and he uses his life lessons from SEAL training to help others in their personal, professional, and family lives. He is a successful motivational speaker, tailor-fitting his inspiring stories and lessons to various audiences. Phillip is also an author, coach, mentor, and volunteer with the Anti-Trafficking Bureau. His acclaimed book, The Truth Behind My Trident, gives a behind-the-scenes look at the culture of SEALs. I am so excited to introduce today our incredible guests. Please help me welcome John P. Weiss and Phillip Koontz. Hi, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hey,
welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show. Once again, it's a pleasure to have you again on the platform.
Great to be back.
So, this is a really great conversation for people today where we celebrate America's freedom and what that means to us. So, let's jump right into an introduction between the two of you or of you. John, let's start with you. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience with your background outside of the short biography that I read?
Well, the short biography was fine. I think you covered all the highlights. Yeah, I'm a 26-year law enforcement veteran. Had a great career in California, in the Scotts Valley Police Department. Got to do a lot of amazing things and missed the town, but we decided to move to Las Vegas in 2017 when I retired. My son wanted to go to school here. My wife is a hospice nurse, and now I spend my time writing and thinking and reading, and I get to be on amazing programs like this with great guests like Phillip.
Awesome. Mr. Phillip, would you love to share?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me back. And it's an honor to be here with you, John. So I was a Navy SEAL for just over 6 years. And let's see, I have a wife and 5 kids, live out here in Colorado. Like you said, I've been a public speaker and author and business coach, and own my own knife company now. So kind of been there, done it. I was a pastor for a little while as well too, and did some contracting work. So yeah, it's been a wild ride for me as I'm just trying to figure out what life looked like, and now kind of hitting my groove and really enjoying what I get to do. And this is one of those things that I get to do, is just being a guest on shows, great shows like yours, and excited to be here.
Thank you.
Perfect.
I appreciate that. So you both have these extensive backgrounds, and it's such an honor to be able to share that with the audience, to get to have a better idea of how we view things. So, John, what is, with your experience, let's talk a little bit about what your idea of freedom is.
You know, when you told me this would be the topic, the first thing I did is I just looked it up. And what I have is the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint.
Mm.
And if you think about the world we live in now, and I know this world, especially the United States, is divided politically. There's a whole constellation of views and everyone's at odds at times. But I think most people want those things. We do want the freedom to be able to think about what we want. We want to be able to read the books we want to read. We want to be able to have opinions without being shot down. We want to be able to live our lives and have other people live their lives. And so one of the things that attracted me to a career in law enforcement was that I believe in order. I believe in civil society, and that families should be able to go out every day and have the freedom to pursue their professions and their hobbies and interests and know that they're going to be safe. And so that's what attracted me to the law enforcement profession. A lot of people say they wanted the action or the adventures, and certainly some of that was fun. But underneath all that was this belief that I believe in having a free society and that people should be safe. And so that's why I was attracted to a law enforcement career. My father was a judge, so he worked in the law. He was a United States Marine before that. My grandfather was a colonel in the Air Force. And now my son is a reservist in the ROTC Air Force. So it's just something that our family has always done, is serve, and we have a very strong affinity for freedom and all that means.
I think at this point it's in the bones, with you've got generations upon generations stacked, this innate desire to show up that way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been a great ride. 26 years in law enforcement. I have a lot of great stories. I'm sure Phillip has just as many or more in his Navy service. But I'm just proud to be in the United States, where we do have our freedoms, and we need to protect them. And so it's great to talk about that for the 4th of July.
I love that you looked it up, because that's something that I would totally do. I always want to make sure that I'm clear on whatever society deems as the definition of something. And so I appreciate that about you. And then putting our own thoughts onto that, and then going a little deeper on, well, why is it that I feel that this is important? And you described that very lovely when you said, well, this is the reason that I went into the field of law enforcement initially. It wasn't because I wanted, to be this super guy or have the exposure, the look, etc., and the power, because that's easily attainable. And I think that you both could understand that as well as myself. When you go into these positions, it's easy to feel this sense of power, and where that can definitely start to overcome you. But it takes this great responsibility to hone that in, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure. It does. When I was 13, 14 years old, my father and mother took me to a restaurant in downtown Los Gatos, California. And we were waiting to go inside when a fight broke out between three men in the parking lot. It was 2 men ganging up on the third man. Now, my father had just recovered from a heart attack a few months before. And so what does he do? While everyone else watches, he runs over and gets in the middle of this fight and tries to break it up. And it scared the death out of me. And the only thing that made me feel so much better was when I saw those police cars show up. Somebody called the police, and my dad is between these three big guys fighting and trying to push them all apart. And the officers showed up, and they took control of the situation. They brought order back. They brought peace back. Some people were arrested. My dad was a witness, but that left an impression on me. And I thought about, it's important to have order in society. It's important to have these controls in place. So there's one more reason why police work was appealing to me.
Yeah. So that brings me to a very interesting point in thought, is that is something that just happens. Not very many people have that, but the people who go into these fields, these positions, who go into the military, who go into law enforcement, any of the first responding positions, usually have that. And I've met plenty that haven't, even though they're still there. That happens too. And I know
Sure.
you both know what that's like. But yes, it's interesting how you just act regardless of the danger involved. And maybe sometimes that's not well thought through, but I think there's just this desire to do that, and it's just automatic. Can you guys tell me what your thoughts are on that?
As far as, yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's automatic. It's that conditioned response. It's that muscle memory, right, from our training, that we immediately just take action. And I know for me, sometimes this might seem a little sadistic, but I'm like, man, I want more opportunities like that, where I can, jump in the middle of stuff and help break things up. And, well, man, I just live this like comfortable life right now. Like, where's all the drama? Where's all the chaos? I'm like, well, it's coming, right? but yeah, like we almost live for those moments where we can really make a tangible difference in a situation that could go very, very bad, and have a lot of innocent, casualties in a way, and really come in. And not because we want to wear a cape, not because we want to be a superhero, like jumping into the scene, but because we really care, because we really have that heart, that deep, innate desire to make a difference, to help protect is huge.
Absolutely. So I'm curious from both of you, when was the first experience, if you can think back, of when that happened to you? When was the first moment that you realized that it was an automatic response to jump in?
That's a good question. I think for me, it wasn't automatic until I started having bullets fly by my head. The first time that you're engaging,
That'll put you into gear.
yeah, the first time that you're engaging the enemy in a firefight, that's when you have to come the first come to Jesus moment, and you're like, oh wow, like this stuff just got very real. And then as soon as I think for me, it was like that realization, and then you just go on autopilot, and you're continually looking out for where your guys are at, and making good, sound battlefield decisions and strategic calls while you're there on the X. So yeah, for me, I think it was definitely sometime pretty early in my first deployment when that happened for me, when I realized, oh wow, like the training's kicking in, and I need to get out of my head now and just respond.
Yeah. How about you, John?
I immediately thought of an incident when I was a rookie cop, and I really wasn't sure how I'd respond. I had training from the academy, and we had a guy that walked into a gun shop in Scotts Valley, California, named Machado, and he was mentally ill. He asked to look at a .357 Magnum, and when they handed it to him, he had brought his own bullets. Oof. And he loaded it, and he ran out into the parking lot. And I remember our dispatcher screaming at the owner of the gun shop. The owner of the gun shop wanted to chase after this guy and engage him. And the dispatcher said, no, don't do that. That's crazy. The cops don't know which one is which. So we responded. This guy got out into an intersection, commandeered a car, pulled a poor old elderly woman out of the car by her hair, and jumped in her car and took off to the neighboring town of Santa Cruz. And all of us in our patrol cars gave chase. He ended up in a gas station in downtown Santa Cruz, California, where amazingly, he proceeds as he's waving this gun around to fill the car up with gas. And all of us come screeching into this gas station. This was also during the first Desert Storm War, and there were protesters all downtown. So imagine this, from the local university, they're out there protesting the war. We're in this gas station with cops, all of us getting out of our cars, pointing our guns at this guy. And we have a patrolman that has it. He's a canine officer, and he unleashes the dog on the gunman, and the gunman shoots the dog, and everybody opens fire on this guy. And even though he was hit like 12 or 13 times, he went down. He actually pushed himself back up once before he fell down again. People see in the movies, they think people get shot and they just go down. They don't always just go down. No. I know, Phillip, you know that more than anyone. But long story short, of course, I was scared to death. I'm, young 20-something, brand new rookie. But the thing that was amazing, Phillip, is that I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just reacting. I took cover. I had my gun out. I was communicating with other officers. We were looking for crossfire, and we brought order out of this chaotic scene. Of course, all the protesters scattered because they thought we were shooting protesters. They didn't know what the incident was. So it was crazy. But I remember calling my parents later that night, and that's when it all kind of hit me, just how insane that was. I'd never, been shot at or around someone shooting like that before. So, and I was amazed that I reacted. I didn't think, I just reacted. I did my job. And we were able to end the situation. I didn't personally shoot the suspect. I was from a position of cover, but others did. But thank God no one was hurt. And the dog recovered, the police dog fully recovered. We had an awards ceremony for him. But that was the first time I realized that your training takes over and you just react. And it felt good to know that I could do that. And then, of course, many incidents after that in my career, training just takes over. And oftentimes when you're relaxed at home later, that's when maybe you go, wow, and it hits you and you have to grapple with that a bit. But
yeah, that's when the adrenaline starts to drain through your body, and you have this like very surreal moment, like, wow, what just happened? And then you're exhausted, and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to like go lay down.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you so much for sharing that, guys. We're going to go into our first commercial, and when we come back, we're going to jump right back in. Stay tuned.
Okay. KimJacobsConsulting.com. People say opportunity knocks on every door. Right. No. Opportunity stands by silently waiting for you to recognize it. So I want you to recognize that this is a time for you. This is an incredible time to have your own talk show. It establishes a level of credibility.
Yes.
And by being exposed to people on a regular basis, it allows you to strategically begin to impact and attract your audience. She can take you in a place in yourself that you can't go by yourself. So go to KimJacobsConsulting.com. That's KimJacobsConsulting.com. Did I say KimJacobsConsulting.com? Yes, you did. Very good. Make sure you go there and sign up for the coaching, and we're looking forward to working with you. You have something special. You have greatness within you.
So welcome back. Guys, those are excellent stories. And so I'll share a little bit about my own, also coming back into a time of when you realize that you are able to act. They used to have this saying, well, I still use it often. You guys probably have already heard me say it, but you don't rise to the level of your courage. You fall to the level of your training. And so that's kind of what you find out when you're met with something, these adverse conditions, these high tense, high energy situations. And one of mine, and I have a few, like you said, John, it's like soon you start to have many, but it's really nice to know how you show up, because when you're a rookie or when you're first starting or when you just, it's the first time going and seeing battle, you don't really know how you're going to show up. And it's kind of like this experiment, so to speak. You have to be faced with something big in order to find out. Yeah. And so one of mine was when I was about to do this traffic stop, and this vehicle was like 3 car lengths ahead of me, but it was on a long stretched highway. I was watching him really swerve, and I wanted to catch up to him. So it was kind of leapfrogging over the other vehicles, making my way slowly. And next thing I knew, the car was rolling a few times down the hill. It had crashed. And so my response was, immediately lights and sirens, call it in a dispatch, let them know what happened. But it was a really beautiful engagement that was very quick, very responsive, and it did everything that I needed to do. Flight for Life came. Koontz, I know I talked about it a little bit. This was the time that I, cut his seatbelt off with the cool knife that I had, and now you're representing knives. So that makes all the difference, right? The tools that we have make a lot of difference, the weapons. And, there was a time when I did my own traffic stop that ended up being a felony stop and being the only one. And my command staff was down the mountain, state patrol was down the mountain. My backup was an hour out. So I had to do this. And it wasn't just one person, it was 3 people in that car that I had to conduct a felony stop for. But those are the moments that we really realize how we show up. And it's interesting to me that there's something within us that is able to come up and show up when the time is right, when we absolutely have to, in order to protect ourselves and others. And it's a great responsibility.
Yeah. When you mentioned that, I just thought of something that was in the news recently. I don't know if you guys followed this plane crash in, was it Bolivia or trying to remember where, but it was a family of these indigenous kids. There was a 13-year-old girl and a younger boy, and I think an infant. And the mother was killed in the plane crash, as well as the pilot. And they were lost in this jungle for like 40 days. It's been in the news, and they just found them recently. You want to talk about rising to the occasion. That little 13-year-old girl figured out that there was food left on the plane. She took care of the younger 2. And they survived in the jungle with pit vipers and spiders and roving bands of armed drug people. I mean, and they survived. So she definitely rose to the occasion. I think to your point, April, we surprise ourselves sometimes when we're put in just insanely difficult situations. I'm sure, Philip, you've probably seen that even with all your training. You never know until you actually are on deployment or you're in a difficult situation how you're going to perform. But it's remarkable to see how people can rise to the occasion.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Yep. There's a lot of people. There's so many people out there that have stories like that, whether they're, and just the will to live kicks in, right? And that protective nature that we're all instilled with, kicks in. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I always think of Tom Hanks in that beautiful movie Castaway, where he's one minute he's on a flight, for work, and next minute he's on a deserted island somewhere.
Yeah.
And even though that's a fictional movie, it was still just moving to see, how to survive, the will to survive, the will to overcome the challenge, whatever it may be.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Captain Phillips, and Tom Hanks is the same one that played the character in the Captain Phillips movie. Yeah. Right. So same thing. There you are. And next thing you know, you're in a little buoy, being held at gunpoint by some pirates, right?
Yeah. I mean, military men and women and police officers, we of course have the benefit of extensive training. But it was always moving to me when I would witness just heroism and amazing acts of courage from everyday men and women in our community and society that would help people out of an automobile accident, or to drag somebody out of a critical incident scene. Those people are remarkable, and it speaks a little bit to that American spirit, that individualism to get the job done no matter what.
Yep.
It does. And I'm very curious to know, why do you think it is, and what does it have to do with the desire to have that freedom when we so strongly have that within us to save ourselves and others, to protect, preserve? What does that mean for our freedom, or why is it such an importance to us as human beings?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the reason why I joined the military. I found myself in corporate America, and I was like, what am I doing? No, I'm not discounting corporate America at all, but it just wasn't for me. I was stuck behind a cubicle for my job. And I just thought to myself, waking up, like, what am I doing with my life? And, I wanted to really make a difference in the world, like make a practical difference, and rid the world of evil. And I could think of no better way than to join the military. And with my swimming background and some of the background that I had, the SEALs, the water kind of made sense for me. And it was really while I was there that just gave me a really great sense of accomplishment. I mean, not only was it a great job, like John was saying, not only is it the adventure that we get to experience, but what transcends that is our deep desire to want to save the innocent, to protect the innocent, and to really be able to bring the fight to people who are hell bent on the destruction of the people and the innocent, and they go to all different lengths to be able to do that. I mean, I've seen men use women and children as shields before, and you just think back on that and you're just like, what kind of human being has the capability and like, what are they thinking? Like, well, how in the world would someone do that? It's mind boggling to me. And so being able to really live for something much bigger than myself was and that patriotism was one of the things that really propelled me into the military and doing something that's far bigger than myself.
Hey, Phillip, staying on that concept and that topic, can you describe a moment that you realized or noticed that you wanted to see, or you realized that I want to know, was there a defining moment that shaped your perspective on freedom?
Yeah, great question. I think that, growing up as kids, we just kind of take it for granted, right? I grew up in a fairly healthy but somewhat dysfunctional home. But my concept of freedom and gosh, being able to ride my bike, to swim practice in the summers and go just leave the house basically for all day, and come back and just not really even wondering if I was, going to be kidnapped or if I was, something wrong was going to happen or bad was going to happen to me. I mean, honestly, I think like I got my bag snatched during Halloween once, right? That was like the worst thing, like, so my concept of safety and protection, growing up was, you took it for granted as we mostly do. For me, I think one of the things when it really flew in my face, this injustice was when I was in college and just seeing the way that people treated each other. And there was a child prostitution issue that was going on in the city that I was in, and trafficking children. That's one of the reasons why I feel very passionately now and try to get involved as much as I can. It was this sense of eye-opening for me. It was, oh my gosh, this moment of realization of this world is there's a darkness that's in this world that sometimes can be tangible. And I was just awakening to that moment of, wow, there's a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of people that are bent on destruction in this life. And I think that was a good wake up call for me as I realized some of the things that were happening literally in my backyard. And I wasn't, it was disturbing to me, and it was good. It was a good kind of disturbance. It stirred something up within me that was like, no, this isn't good. And if not me, then who, kind of thing, like if I'm not going to do something about it, then who is? I love the phrase, the quote from Edmund Burke's, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And that was one of the quotes that I really held on to that propelled me into the military to experience what I did.
Oh, that hit me at the core. And that goes back to the discussion on when we just, if that flip is switched, when we have to perform, when we just do it, and so I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. John, can you tell me your perspective and your time where the moment hit that really shaped your perspective on freedom?
Well, I have two thoughts. Yeah, the first, to answer your question and then a comment on what Phillip said. For me, it goes back to that story I told you about my father trying to stop a fight between these men in front of a restaurant. It amazed me that so many people stood around and watched this fight, but nobody wanted to get involved or get hurt. And my father stood in. And I realized that, if we want to be safe in society, and even at 13 years old, I thought about that. I thought about, look at this. The police showed up and they brought back order, and the guys that caused this fight were arrested. So, people want to be safe. They want to have their freedom. They want to know that they can go out every day and not be hurt. And sort of what Phillip was talking about his work in the SEALs, and also his interest in, what we're seeing today with children being taken advantage of, with trafficking and all of these things. If you look at our history, the United States history, going back to 1776 and the 13 northern colonies that said they'd had enough with overtaxation and no representation. They'd had enough with things like, the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, and they decided that we wanted to have our freedom. We were done with this oppressive overregulation. And what undergirds, I think, a lot of that American thinking, even back then when we were first forming as a new nation, for our nationhood, is fairness. We want fairness. People want to know that things are fair, that people are being treated fairly. And I think those of us who are attracted to serving either in our great United States military or in our many law enforcement organizations there's a sense that of fairness, that we want people to be treated fairly. We don't want the bullies to take over. We don't want the criminals to take advantage of the weak. When I interacted with elderly people in our community, one of the things I always noticed with them was when we showed up, they'd call and say someone's in their backyard. And sometimes it was a deer, but there was this happy look in their eyes when they saw young men and women in uniform show up to help them, that they felt safe. When we would arrest the right person for committing a crime against somebody else, the victims were always so thankful that there was fairness, that their rights and their freedoms were protected. So that's what I think is one of the things that's great about our American culture, is we still have this culture. Whether you swing to the left or the right, I think most Americans believe in fairness. They want to be treated fairly. And we can disagree sometimes on how we achieve that and what's the best political tools to make that happen. But underneath all that, I think if we think about the 4th of July and American freedoms, we think about everyone wants to be treated fairly.
Yeah, and John, you brought up such a great point, and it's very interesting too that it seems like everyone is polarized nowadays until a September 11th happens, until a national crisis happens, and then what? And then we all band together as Americans, right? Good old red-blooded Americans, and people are pouring into churches again, and we're all linking arms, and we're like, hey, we're united, and it takes these catastrophes sometimes to really be able to unite us. And I'm not a proponent of like, oh, hey, bring on the catastrophes, right? Because that's awful when that happens. But it's very interesting in our history of the United States when things like that happen, we really band together. And that's when I just want to encourage people that are listening right now, be known for what you're for rather than what you're against, right?
Amen.
Instead of raising the social media, getting on social media, raising the flag, saying, oh, I don't like this and I don't like this and I don't agree with this. How about we just hit the pause button and find our similarities, right? And unite with around what we can agree on, right? So be known for what you're for rather than for what you're against. I think is just a good, helpful reminder for myself, right? Because I can get caught up in this. John, you're talking about watching the news. I'm like, man, I can't watch the news much anymore, right? Because I feel my blood pressure raising up again, right? But yeah, it's just a good, helpful reminder, especially on the 4th of July. It's good. We are one nation under God, and you know what? When the stuff hits the fan, we all band together, and we need to remember that. I
remember that on 9/11 and afterwards, just how much people did come together. It was a shock to the nation. Sometimes we're lulled into a false sense of complacency.
Yes.
When
Yes.
nothing goes wrong, we get so accustomed to the planes taking off and landing, and our lattes are made at Starbucks, and we can scroll through all the social media piffle, and look at cat videos, and life is a Shangri-La until something happens that shakes you out of that false sense of confidence. And God forbid, I don't want anything like that to happen in this country. But, we have to never forget that freedom is never free. There are forces in the world that are not aligned with us, not just Chinese balloons and spy stations in Cuba that are keeping an eye on what we're doing, but Central American countries that are hosting, Iranian warships. There's a lot of scary stuff going on in the world right now that we cannot rest on our laurels if we want to keep this precious freedom that we have. And that doesn't mean going towards abject militarism and getting involved in every conflict. But I do think we always have to keep that in mind, that freedom is not free. And we need to, both in our communities, where law enforcement plays a part, and nationally and internationally, where our military plays a part. We always need to protect our freedoms and align with our other nations that agree with us in trying to promote peace and freedom in the world, because there are dangers in the world.
Yeah. Our freedom was purchased through human collateral, both stateside in CONUS and outside as well too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
This brings to mind the concept of the warrior in the garden. I don't know if you two are familiar with, but basically, you both are describing things when they happen, we finally unite, we're finally putting to action, but we become so complacent until that happens, and we become negative and harmful towards one another. I'm not sure why that is either. But what are some of the things that we can push people to come to an understanding of? Phillip, I love the point that you brought out. And also, the warrior in the garden concept, to me, is really something that would be a great idea to ponder on, because it's preparing for the worst, but living in such a way to where you're not on an anxiety high or, preparing. I don't know. John, help me out. Can you explain this a little bit better? Do you know what I'm saying?
I think I know what you're getting at. I mean, I think of even the word peace officer, is that we always prepare for the worst. We hope for the best, but we prepare for the worst. We do that in our homes. It's why we have alarm systems and security systems, and choose to defend ourselves in our homes so that we're not victims. We do that in society, but we also have to balance out the warrior mentality of going after these things with the peace side of it as well, of treating people well, thinking the best of others instead of the worst. And what Phillip just mentioned too, about achievement. And instead of always trying to find a complaint in society or blaming somebody else for every little ill, we'll go out there and fix it, contribute to it. There's so many positive things you can do that have nothing to do with conflict, but have to do with making the world or community you live in a better place. And that anyone can do that, regardless of your background, race, religion. And I see that. I see it in my own community in Las Vegas. I see how people treat one another here. We just had the Stanley Cup here in Las Vegas, and our wonderful Golden Knights were victorious over the Florida Panthers. But one of the things that really made me feel good was there were a lot of Floridians who came here to watch the final match. And one of the things they talked about in the local news was, wow, we're really impressed with how well Las Vegans treated us. I mean, they were so nice to us. We're wearing our Panthers regalia, and yet they said, hey, come on in. We're so glad you're here, and thanks for coming to our community. It's so encouraging when I see things like that in society. And the problem is the media thrives on negativity and always throwing up the worst. It's almost like the powers that be want us to be divided and at each other's throats. But really, if you drive around in society, every day I see these moving examples of people helping one another and being amazing supporters to one another in our community. And gosh, on the 4th of July, that's something we need to really promote and celebrate and encourage as much as possible, instead of division and arguing all the time.
Well said, John. In the SEAL teams, I was reminded as you were talking, we have a pretty common Latin phrase, si vis pacem para bellum, and that is, if you want peace, prepare for war. You know, of all the brothers that I've operated with, we all desire peace so much so that we're willing to lay down our lives for it. But in order to have that peace, which we desire above everything else, you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for worst case scenario. And how are you going to do that, both individually, for your family, professionally, that sort of thing? Benjamin Franklin said, by failing to prepare, you're really preparing to fail, right? So it's that mindset of, we want peace first and foremost, but peace is not just going to happen. It's not a light switch where you just, turn it on and, we got peace now and we can get fat and happy, right? It takes a lot of intentionality to be able to prepare for that. And that whole remembrance thing too is so important, that wow, there's been so many countless men and women in the past who have given their lives in the line of duty and in the military as well too, that have, paved the way for us to be able to enjoy the freedom and the peace that we enjoy. That's
a great point. My father often talked about when he says, when you talk about peace, you need to ask whose peace. Some people talk about peace like it's just, we want peace, but there are parameters to peace. Whose peace? What does this peace entail? Do I keep my freedoms? I mean, we can have a peaceful society where everyone is living under a tyrant. I mean, it might be that there's not a lot of shootings or incidents in North Korea. Maybe it's a peaceful society because these people live in abject fear every day.
Right.
So the kind of peace we live under is very important. There's a famous historian, Will and Ariel Durant, his wife, and there was a quote in one of their history books I never forgot that he wrote, "Nobody ever wants to recognize the inexorable periodicity of war." And what they meant by that was, unfortunately, humankind, we haven't evolved that far yet, that sooner or later there are conflicts. And we are trying to avoid that right now with what's happening in Ukraine and Russia and with what's going on with China and the brinksmanship. And my dad always said it's so important that we read our history and that we never forget what peace means. And when you look at other countries, when you look at Pol Pot in Cambodia, and look what Chairman Mao did, killing millions in China, when you look at Russia and the collectivization of farms and all the people that died in that, and you look at how people live right now without freedoms in Cuba, and so there are these ideologies in the world where people are not living with freedom, and it's not free, and we always have to guard against that and make sure that we are prepared while always seeking peace. And I love what you said, Philip, about how everyone you work with in the teams, well, you guys are lovers of peace. That's why you do the dangerous work you do, because you want peace. If you could retire tomorrow and not be necessary, you'd probably celebrate that and sell your knives and do something different. But the reality is that what's the old line? We sleep well at night because rough men stand ready to visit violence upon those who would harm us. So until we evolve as a humankind, we're always going to have to worry about maintaining peace.
Yeah, I would say that maybe that's part of the journey. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said well said. That was perfect. Yeah. Spot on. Yep.
Thanks.
It was. And I was mentioning that I feel it's part of the journey to our evolution to experience these things. And that's the way that we grow. And that's just the way it is. Right. But you gentlemen have, thank you so much for your service, first off, and your continued service, because you're just serving in a different way. And maybe I may venture to say a greater, more expansive way. So,
Philip, I've noticed there are a few Navy SEALs that we see now in the public eye that are writing books and they're teaching about really and there's a common theme, which doesn't surprise me coming from the SEALs, about personal achievement, personal discipline. I think we need more of that message in society today. I think instead of always worrying about, how people have wronged us and always having complaints about how awful the world is, I think we need to celebrate more personal achievement, because really freedom comes from discipline too. You can sit at home all day long and watch TV and be free, and maybe you're a little you're a family scion that came from money. You don't have to work. But what I've learned is that the real freedom comes from peace of mind of knowing that you've done difficult things to be a better person. It comes from pursuing virtue. It comes from helping others. And that isn't always easy. And it doesn't always feel like freedom. Sometimes it feels like a real burden. But, the alternative, if you don't do the right thing, if you don't work hard to support your family, if you don't rise up when you need to do the right thing, you have to live with yourself at night. And you know what? That's a prison that's not freedom. If you have to wake up every morning thinking, darn it, I didn't do what I should have done. I should have spent more time with my kid, or I could have been a better person at work. I should have lied less. So people that do the hard work and challenge themselves and achieve, it may be hard. It doesn't always feel like freedom. Sometimes there's suffering, but there is freedom in suffering.
Yeah. That's the message. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That, really taking that personal responsibility, and also the connections that we have with each other when the time arises.
Mm-hmm. That's actually, John, just from a personal standpoint, that's one of the things that I have to continually remind myself when I start to feel sorry for myself, right? Because I've got herniated discs in my back, from jumping out of airplanes and landing hard, and I've got a torn labrum, 340 degrees, and my body's hurting, and I'm getting older, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this sucks, and start to feel bad for myself and have a little pity party. And I'm like, but you know what? I'd go back and do it all over again if I could. Because you're right, there is suffering, in the midst of peace and freedom as well too, that we enjoy. So yeah, I like how you worded that. So that was a good reminder to me to just continue to suck it up and have that good perspective, right?
Hey, I have to keep reminding myself too, Phillip. I had a back surgery for a bulging disc, from jiu-jitsu and wrestling with people in my career, and my shoulder doesn't work the way it quite used to, and it's frustrating. But yeah, I'm with you, but I wouldn't have changed anything. I'm proud of the profession we all work in, and April, you were in it too, in law enforcement, and so we salute you in your service. But I just salute the people in my community. I mean, I see people from all walks of life. I see kids, lemonade stand here when it's hot in the summer. They're little entrepreneurs. They're selling their lemonade, and helping us cool off. So it's just nice to see things like that.
Yep.
It is. I'm curious, what message would you both like to share with the next generation, speaking of lemonade stands, with the next generation of leaders who will be responsible for continuing the progress made towards a more equitable and just world?
You want to go first, Phillip?
Yeah, I love Brene Brown, and for the life of me, I'm going to butcher her quote, but basically what she says is, if we continually point the finger at other people and don't take responsibility for our own actions, we basically, the future, our stories are written by the fear, the blame, the shame, and the anger that we have towards others. Rather than taking responsibility for your actions, it actually frees us to then be able to write our own ending of our stories. So Brene, sorry if you're listening to this, I just totally butchered that, but you get the gist of it. And that's what I would say to young leaders growing up and emerging now into society. And as they're maturing, I would say, hey, don't be afraid to say, I screwed up. In my opinion, those are the four most powerful words a leader can say is, I messed that up. Taking ownership for our mistakes, learning from those rather than blaming others or extenuating circumstances that are around us for the mistakes that we really made. It's so powerful. And people want to follow a leader who is able to humble themselves, ask for forgiveness, say that they're sorry. That humanizes them. That it's not a do as I say, not as not as I do kind of mentality. So yeah, that's really important. And unfortunately, we don't see a whole lot of that on the big screen as far as the political leaders that we have out there. It's just a lot of finger pointing and a lot of blaming and shaming people. So yeah, taking responsibility for our actions and from our mistakes is really important.
I agree with you. That was awesomely said. I don't even know how to say that. I couldn't have said it better. And you're right. People, you would know this very, very well, Phillip, that because you come from a place where there are very few who have accomplished and gone through what you have. And it's also the same with, I think I heard that it's 1% that actually serve.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I know there's not a lot in law enforcement and for first responding positions. It is few.
Yeah.
So, John, what is your take on that? What is your message to the future generations?
Well, let's see. Dwight Eisenhower said that freedom is really the opportunity to practice self-discipline. And my 3-word advice would be do hard things. The low road of taking the easy way, looking for hacking, go on the internet, there's a million, how to hack this, how to hack that, how to get ahead, doing less. And, when we do hard things, that's when we achieve, that's when we feel pride in our accomplishments, and that's how we move society forward. And I agree with Phillip. We need leaders that aren't just scripted, that have a teleprompter with a speechwriter with some clever quotes telling people what they think. We want authenticity in our leaders, and we're willing to forgive our leaders when they make mistakes and they own it, as long as we know they're trying to do the right thing. And I do think there are some leaders out there in the private sector and in businesses that rise to that level. Unfortunately, we don't hear about them that often because the news would much rather focus on the negativity, it seems. But I think that when people are moved to do hard things, when they are willing to take responsibility, as Phillip said so well, when they make mistakes, people are willing to support those types of leaders. And it's going to take those kinds of leaders to move us forward. There are so many challenges facing us in the world today. And it amazes me. We have 350 million people in this country. We've got to find some exemplary leaders. And I understand why most people don't want to jump into the political arena. But Teddy Roosevelt talked about that. He wants to be in the arena, right? He wants to be where the action is. He wants to be the one who's trying to make positive changes in the world. And so people that we're willing to do hard things, make mistakes, but keep fighting. That's what we need more than ever.
Both of you gentlemen have gone into this new entrepreneurial world where that's a really big step from the very disciplined positions that you both came from, the structure of it. And being an entrepreneur, there's only the structure that you create, right? And so how has coming from the past that you have come from shaped who you are today and what you do now? How has it had a play in your concept of freedom? And for example, what comes to mind, you both are doing things that excite you, where you want to get up every single day. How has that had a play?
I think one of the things that comes to my mind is, what wakes me up in the morning is wanting to make a positive, lasting impact in the people that I speak to. And that's really what my perspective is when I wake up in the day is wanting to make that positive impact with people is important for me. And taking ownership, for mistakes and stuff too is huge. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. Yeah.
Okay. And how about you, John? I think what's really cool about what you do, John, too, and you both have aspects of it, but you really went into the arts, which is really not the manly thing to do, right? So you have very much geared in a total opposite direction, so to speak,
Right.
on what society deems what they would expect of us coming from these fields.
Yeah, I always had an artist's heart. Even as a kid, I was always drawing. My dad was a weekend oil painter, and he was very creative and artistic. But he became an attorney and a judge. So I thought I might want to be an artist or something along those lines when I was a kid. I did a lot of cartooning. And even throughout my law enforcement career, I was drawing political cartoons for the local newspapers. And then I jumped over into landscape painting. And I think, one of the things I can't help but laugh at, Phillip, is that, when I was in the police department during my police chief days, I remember I took a workshop once, a landscape painting workshop in Idaho. And I was telling some of the guys at work about it. And my captain said, Chief, he's shaking his head. And this captain was on our SWAT team. And he said, Chief, just tell them you're going to a tactical firearms, workshop. Don't tell them you're going to a landscape painting workshop. You're killing me, Chief. So I think they'd really laugh today that I'm on a podcast with a Navy SEAL, that they just would laugh and go, how did that happen, right? So yeah, I'm the the touchy-feely creative guy who loves poetry and writing and the humanities and literature and painting. But they used to call me the accidental police chief because I also really loved serving, and I loved being in uniform and serving my community, and I get the best of both worlds. Now I feel, to answer your question, April, that my law enforcement background makes me a better writer, makes me a better creative. I have a deeper understanding of humanity and all of its beauty and all of its ugliness. I've seen enough to know the beauty in people and the ugliness. And in my writing, I choose to try to write elegant stories and essays that uplift people, that inspire them, bring them some hope, and try to encourage people to live a better life. So that's very fulfilling to me. And that's an extension of what I try to do as a police officer in my community, is to make people's lives better there. Now I'm trying to inspire people with my writing. And it's very fulfilling because I get amazing emails back from readers who share their stories, and they inspire me. What some of the people tell me, people that are battling with illnesses or have lost loved ones and how they got through it. And so it's a wonderful dance to be a writer and to have feedback from readers. I learn from them, they learn from me. And it's a great way to have a second chapter in one's life in a new career.
I love that, John. And you truly are a warrior in a garden. And people can look that up because that's exactly what you are. And both of you are, and I wanted to bring that up because of the importance of that artistic aspect of us and how we should recognize that and share that with the world. That is what makes the world beautiful. And Phillip, I wanted to say about you were very much wanting to be involved with your family. You have 5 children. That's an aspect of you that is very important and you hold near and dear to your heart. And so I'm going to also bring in, I'm going to bring in my lovely husband, Garrett, with us.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you?
Nice to see you.
Good to see you both again. So this is a little surprise because I was like, oh, okay. But I just want to tell you, as a single person, like as one individual, because I know I don't represent everybody, but from my perspective, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for continued service, because I know you haven't finished yet. I mean, the arena has changed, the delivery, maybe your uniform or your approach, but you're still serving. I mean, just coming on this show and being supportive and wanting to do better and give more represents so much for me as that one individual. And really, I think the point of the conversation, or at least from my perspective, the point of the show in many ways is that freedom is one of those things that we have. We can do anything we want. And we've had people on the show who've represented that. They've been homeless to become doctors, to have had battled cancer or other challenges, and they fought through that. So freedom is more than just this concept. It's really something I take personal, and I think everybody on the show's taking their personal perspective for it. But let's be honest, without the people who are willing to guard the wall, guard the yard, protect the freedom with their lives at risk, potentially, it's just a concept. So from the bottom of my heart, I have military members in my family, and so it just means a lot to me as an individual. But also, I think, we can have this show because somebody stood up for the ability to have a free voice, to say something, to make a difference. So you made a difference in my life. I know you make a difference in others. Thank you. I don't know how else to say it, but thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah.
John, I'm a little envious of how well-rounded you are too, my friend. So it's good. It's nothing to be ashamed of, man.
John, you can put, if I can interject. I'm sorry, Phil. I have to back up for a second. I've played video games that are Navy SEAL video games. So to hear that's my experience, right? So to hear you say that's what a compliment. I mean, I would replay that over and over and over. And John, I too am envious. You're awesome. But I would just play that over and over and over again. I would make that into a soundbite to be my alarm in the morning. Phil, can you just say that one more time?
Yeah. I mean, just so you know, pulling back the curtain a little bit, full disclosure for me, I love to garden too. So we got like a little raised garden up on my porch, and we got some tomatoes and some snow peas and some peppers up there. So love that. Love just getting down on the floor and wrestling with my kids and playing Legos with them, so I got a tender side too. I'm not just eating nails all day. So
the best samurais were the ones who did like origami and like design a bonsai tree and stuff too. There's a real art to being a warrior. And that's why, like in martial arts, which was my background, that's why the art part is in there. It's combat with understanding and compassion, and the greater you, I guess, ability you have to protect or take a life if you had to, right? The more of an artist you are, more compassionate, I guess.
I think the media and movies does a real disservice to our men and women who serve in the military and law enforcement, because they get a real skewed view. And the example of that, and maybe Phillip's experienced this too, is people would say to me, "Gosh, I can't believe you were a cop, John. You just don't seem like one. I mean, you like to paint and write." And what they don't realize is that I can't tell you how many men and women I worked with that I knew a guy on a SWAT team that was a thespian. He was in plays, and he'd invite us to plays in San Jose. I knew other cops that were, artists and poets and musicians, gardeners, to speak to Phil. People don't realize that we're not just one-dimensional. I think there's plenty of Navy SEALs out there that maybe finally trained military personnel, but they're also husbands and wives, and they're artists, and they have maybe music. They have a whole other side of themselves besides just their career. And I think we tend to make people one-dimensional, not realize that people are many things.
Well, I think you're right in my perspective. Like, it is the Hollywood notion. I mean, it's probably makes a more exciting movie when you have the music and the fire and the bombs and the bullets going off and the helicopter sound and everything awesome, versus like, hey, that guy's mowing his grass out there.
Yeah.
Reality is, you drive an SUV, like not a Humvee every day, or you do this or that. You get a flat tire too. So I appreciate
just so long as you don't drive a minivan. Just don't drive a minivan.
That's too much. That's too much.
I don't want to be exclusive of those who drive minivans. So
I'm teasing. I'm totally teasing. That makes you even more.
It's good to see that young man too.
Yeah.
You got a special guest, so I figured he climbed up here, so I figured I'd bring him on the screen as well too. This is my son Zadok.
Oh, hi, Zadok. Well, that's what it's about. I mean, this is what we fight for. Is our family, our children, our freedoms. So that's beautiful.
I guess if we're mowing lawns and barbecuing or celebrating, this is what we're celebrating.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. We should have gratitude for all that we have, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Agreed.
We talked a little bit about that, April, didn't we, on our last show? A lot about that. That gratitude piece is huge.
Oh, it is.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this special day and for sharing with everyone that this is what it's about. And so enjoy your freedoms, be grateful for your freedoms. And this is what we're here for, to share in that and to be connected within our communities.
Absolutely. Have a great 4th of July.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good
Excellent.
4th of
April,
July.
thanks for having us on the show.
Thank you.
Absolute
Thank you.
pleasure.
Bye.
Hey.
Bye.